So a lot of people say that Colombians are among the friendliest people in the world, but just how true is this? Hi all, I'm Ezrado and you're watching my travel channel where I talk all things Colombia. Today I wanted to take a look at the popular and largely true claim that Colombians are extremely friendly people. Now to be clear right off the bat, this is something that I've said myself before in previous videos, and yes, it is something I still believe to be largely true. But of course, life is never quite so simple, and I think there are a few nuances to this claim that are worth exploring. So let's start by taking a look at what this claim of Colombians being really friendly is based on. Personally, I think it comes down to two main points. Firstly, many Colombians can be very lively and extroverted, which can make approaching people a lot easier than it would be if they were very closed and introverted. Then the second point I'd make is that there is a lot of cultural emphasis on togetherness in Colombia, both with friends and especially family. It has what I'd call a collectivist culture where there's a larger focus on interdependence, meaning that people are much more consciously looking out for one another in many aspects of life. This would be in contrast to a more independent culture like you see in many Western countries, where camaraderie can exist, but it's often segregated into more specific aspects of life, like with friends and family you're especially close with, or working with people in a job. For a lot of people though, this innate altruistic inclination isn't something that pierces through every facet of their life, like you'd see in a collectivist culture. Okay, so those are my two main reasons why I consider Colombians very friendly people, and those are definitely some important points that really make all the difference when it comes to day-to-day interactions. If you want to hear me gush some more about all the other things I love about Colombians, I've actually already done a whole video on that which you can check out here or via the link in the description. For now though, I wanted to take a look at the other side of this because believe it or not, not every single interaction I've had here has been totally warm. I know that might seem like a given in even the friendliest countries of the world. Obviously there are kind people and there are hostile people everywhere, but the way in which hostility presents itself I think can differ from country to country, which is why I thought it'd be interesting to discuss how people show this in Colombia. Also, as obvious as the claim that not everyone is friendly anywhere may be, I feel like this is something that many overlook before coming to Colombia for the first time, and it's important not to set unrealistic expectations before coming to any country. So yes, once again, I have to stress that most people I've encountered in Colombia have been pretty warm, but today I'm focusing on this small portion of people who are the exception to this. Okay, so in the rare cases I've encountered hostility, most of the time it hasn't been with my actual friends, but rather momentary interactions with people in a business setting, like with shop workers or Uber drivers. Whilst most people here are generally warm, one pattern I've noticed in several of these less than friendly interactions I've had is a sense of dryness that sometimes feels like it borders on disinterest. I think when it comes to even transactional interactions, you still sort of expect a level of professional politeness. Now personally, I think part of what constitutes this politeness is to exhibit a sense of welcoming to the person you're engaging with, and it doesn't have to be that complicated. It might be a smile, it might be the inflection in your voice, or often just an authentic "Hi, how you doing" is enough. You don't have to engage with someone like a friend, but just have enough engagement to show that you acknowledge this person and are accepting of them. Now you might be confused because by and large, Colombians are great with this. The majority of the time, wherever you may be, Colombians can be very hospitable, welcoming people. But remember, I'm talking about the exception here, and in this small subset of people, I have found there to be a pattern where the person seems to be somewhat disengaged from the exchange or conversation. You might just assume this to be introversion, but honestly, I don't think this is really what it is. I'm actually a bit of an introvert myself, but I wouldn't say this inhibits me from being civil or showing basic social graces towards people, you know? What I'm referring to here are interactions where this social etiquette is absent, to the point where I feel more overtly like my presence is not welcome. As I said before, most of these kinds of encounters have appeared in more transactional interactions, where the person is engaging with me as a worker in their job, like Airbnb, Uber, or a laundry. Again, this is far from every experience, but it's something I've seen enough to say, okay, this is a thing here with certain types of people. I'd say Uber in particular is where I've encountered this the most. There's this sense sometimes that the person just does not want to engage at all and is just solely focused on getting you from point A to point B to fulfill their obligation. Now you might say these kinds of people can be found in any country, and to that I'd say yeah, absolutely. What my point is though is that when it comes to hostility, this seems to be one of the most common ways it presents itself in Colombia, in my opinion. Obviously, every country has its own common way that hostility manifests itself. For example, I'd say snobbery and people who are patronising as a form of hostility you'll find infinitely more in Australia than Colombia. In Colombia though, this kind of apathy can be a common conduit for this, again in my opinion. I just sometimes have this feeling that I may be on thin ice with someone even if I've only just met them. Just a few weeks ago, for instance, I remember going to a laundromat and I was like, "Hola, ¿cómo está?" And I was trying to be warm and smiley, but the person at the counter just paused and gave me a deadpan look as if to say, "Well, what do you want?" Again, it really made me feel like I'd done something wrong, like I just ruined this guy's day for daring to show up to a laundromat with some laundry. In another instance, there was an Airbnb host who I felt was very blasé with me. He was around an hour late showing up to check me in, and I realized that tardiness is common in Colombia, but in this instance, I felt the lack of effort was driven by a sort of disinterest, as when he showed up, there were no smiles, warm greetings, or anything like that. It was all very minimal talk regarding mostly just the rules of the apartment. And you know, I was trying to be really civil and polite and warm and smiley and all that, but it was just not being reciprocated whatsoever. It really felt like he was on the verge of getting mad at me over something. Now again, I know I said this a lot already, but I really want to stress that these scenarios have been few and far between for me. On the whole, most people have been very hospitable just as much, if not more, than my home country. All I'm doing here is identifying patterns in how hostility can manifest itself in the occasional cases I've experienced it in Colombia. Most people I've found though are not like this at all, and I've seen many Colombians who are also taken aback at these attitudes when they come up against them. In other words, this isn't something that's necessarily culturally accepted, even if it exists here and there. But I think I've said enough for today. I'll let you make of my experiences what you will, and let you have your own experiences to decide what you make of these kinds of people. If I'm really to get into assumptive territory, I do almost wonder sometimes if me being a foreigner has anything to do with how these kinds of people react to me. Most Colombians are fairly kind and inquisitive about it, but when it comes to these few unfriendly people, I do have to wonder whether they'd see me differently if I was a Colombian. Whatever the case, I hope you got something out of this. One final time, I want to make it clear that this is not a video to put down Colombians in general. I think overall, it still is a very friendly country. Honestly, for every one of these interactions, I've had many more that have been very pleasant. I just wanted to make the case that there is no country on earth that's completely immune to hostility, and so I think it's good to have realistic expectations about this before coming anywhere. That'll do it for today though. Thanks for watching this far. If you have any suggestions for a future video topic, you're welcome to leave them in the comments and I'll definitely consider them. As always, feel free to like, subscribe, bell, and I'll see you in the next one. Ciao!